Hello, and welcome to a video lecture for Mr. Mosier's 8th grade U.S. History class. The purpose of today's lecture is to look at Reconstruction. This will be a three-part series where we're going to look at part one today. Reconstruction, a nation tries to heal in post-Civil War America between 1865 and 1877. Our readings for this section comes to us pages 552 to 557 and 558 to 563. Guiding questions for this lecture are: what is meant by the term Reconstruction? What was President Lincoln's 10% plan for Reconstruction, and why wasn't he able to see this plan carried out? What were the goals of the Wade-Davis bill and the Reconstruction Acts, and how did the radical Republicans and President Johnson clash over Reconstruction? Who won? So what is Reconstruction? Reconstruction is looked upon as this time period after the American Civil War between the years of 1865 and 1877, where really the federal government is kind of in control of the South to rebuild them and to bring them back into the Union. Remember, this country was fractured. It was divided in the Civil War, North and South, Union versus Confederacy. Reconstruction is this 12-year window of time where the country tries to rebuild. The question that will be kind of guiding us throughout all of these presentations will be: does Reconstruction bring about peace and equality for all the races, or is really Reconstruction just the first stage of many on a very long and difficult struggle for equality for all Americans? And for those that know your history, realize that we still deal with racism today, and there's still a lot more in our history that we'll be looking at that's going to be part of this journey and part of the struggle. 1864, Lincoln is running for re-election. At that time, the war didn't seem like it was going to end anytime soon, but two major victories with the Battle of Vicksburg and the victory at Gettysburg, Sherman's marching through Atlanta, completely destroying the South, really helps secure Lincoln's victory in 1864 when he wins re-election. And then when he is sworn into office that following spring, the war is seen by a lot of people that it's coming to an end. It's just really a matter of time. It's just a question of how much longer is this going to last. As Lincoln is sworn in, he gives a very powerful inaugural speech, probably one of his best speeches he gives. In this speech, he says and ends with malice towards none, with the charity for all, with the firmness that is in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace. Lincoln knew the war was coming to an end. The question before us is, how will we bind up the nation together? These years of violence and loss. Remember, 620,000 plus Americans have been killed. You've got towns in the South that have been just completely destroyed by total war. And you've got the abolishment of slavery, the end of slavery. So there's a lot of things for the nation to do at the end of the Civil War. The question is, what do we do? What is the plan that we follow? In Reconstruction, there's actually going to be four particular plans that try to bring about this Reconstruction. How are we going to rebuild the South and bring it back into the Union? These are the four plans that we're going to be looking at. Lincoln's own plan, known as the 10% plan, something called the Wade-Davis bill, President Johnson's plan, and the Reconstruction Acts. So let's talk here about Lincoln here first. Unfortunately for Lincoln, he is not able to see the fulfillment of Reconstruction. His second term was going to be about Reconstruction. Unfortunately, Lincoln is assassinated only a few days after the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. He's killed by the actor John Wilkes Booth while attending a play of Our American Cousins at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. His vice president was Andrew Johnson. Now, what's interesting about Andrew Johnson was he was not a Republican. He actually was a Democrat from Tennessee, so he was a Southern Democrat. So why did Lincoln pick him as a running mate? Well, the Republican parties were hoping to form a unity party between the Northerners and these border states, because Tennessee is one of those border states. So Lincoln and Johnson run on a ticket, not really as a Republican, but they call themselves the National Union Party, in the hopes of securing that election. 1864, it was not sure if Lincoln was going to win, so he picked this running mate in the hopes that it will show a sign of unity to help win votes in the North, which ends up working because Lincoln ends up winning. But Johnson is now president. The president is now killed. He's assassinated. Johnson is now the new president. And he's not a Republican. He's not from the North. And the question is, what kind of plan will Johnson fulfill? What will his plan be for Reconstruction? Now, Lincoln, before he died, actually, had a plan for Reconstruction. Was starting to implement this plan before his assassination. His plan was known as the 10% Plan. It was a pretty lenient plan. It offered Southerners complete amnesty or a pardon of all illegal acts of supporting the rebellion. Basically, it said that even though their action of rebellion was a treason, they could be sent to jail, they could be executed. Lincoln says, no, we're going to have malice towards none. Charity for all. We're going to be kind. We're not going to make them go to jail. We're not going to arrest them. All they have to do is swear an oath of loyalty to the country, say that we're going to stay loyal to the United States, and agree that slavery was illegal. Once only 10% of your state's population made that oath, you could form a new government, and that state, once it had its new government and 10% of the population had taken the loyalty oath, would be freely admitted back into the Union. Lincoln's plan here was to make it easy to get back into the Union. He did not want the South to suffer any further. He wanted to quickly put the country back together so it could go about its business of growing out west. And so Lincoln wants a very simple, straightforward process. Now you can imagine that many Northerners did not like Lincoln's plan. They felt his plan was too easy on the South. These were men, after all, who committed treason. They had fought against their own nation. So a couple of congressmen named Wade and Davis passed a bill through Congress known as the Wade-Davis bill. And like Lincoln, it did say that the states had to put a ban on slavery, and they did have to swear an oath of loyalty. However, in the Wade-Davis bill, 51% of the state had to take the oath of loyalty before they could be remitted back into the Union. So 51% of the state residency voted for or had a loyalty oath, and then they were able to get a government established. Then they would be slowly brought back into the Union. Lincoln felt this was way too harsh of a plan, and he actually vetoes the bill so it doesn't go into law. So we have here the Congress having a view of what Reconstruction should look like, and the president who has a view of what Reconstruction should look like. But unfortunately, the president is assassinated. Lincoln is killed by John Wilkes Booth. So we're kind of at an interesting impasse here with a new president and a Congress who feels very strongly about what this Reconstruction should look like. Johnson, now that he's president, has his own plan for Reconstruction. Johnson says, well, I'm going to put governors. I'm going to appoint people as governors over all the 11 seceding states, and they're going to be responsible to me as president, and we're going to oversee this Reconstruction. And like Lincoln, he wanted to have a very quick plan for Reconstruction. He wanted all the southern states to write brand new state constitutions, elect a new state government, repeal their act of secession, saying, my bad, sorry we broke up, sorry we seceded, refused to pay their Confederate war debts, cancel their war debts, and they had to ratify this 13th Amendment, this new add-on to the Constitution that would make slavery illegal in the entire United States. Once the South did those steps, then they could be brought back into the Union. Again, it's a pretty quick process. Like Lincoln, Johnson felt that this should be a very painless and quick process to bring this country back together. Well, here you have a problem. Remember, Lincoln and his own Republican Party did not agree on what Reconstruction should look like. And now we have a Democrat president and Congress not seeing eye to eye. So the Republicans actually offer their own series of Reconstruction laws called the Reconstruction Acts, which basically takes the South, the old Confederacy, breaks up into 5 military districts. Each district will be ran by a general, and those generals will kind of oversee the Reconstruction efforts of the South. The South had to write a new state constitution, but not only did they have to ratify the 13th Amendment, now they had to ratify a new 14th Amendment that guaranteed African American full citizenship. This is in response to the Dred Scott decision before the Civil War, where the Supreme Court said African Americans were never intended to be American citizens and never will be American citizens. And many Northern Republicans were concerned that if the South was brought in so quickly back into power, that a lot of freed slaves, a lot of African Americans would be kind of pulled out of being treated fairly and equally. And so they wanted to make the South go through a lot more hoops to ensure equality for African Americans. So here you had the South passing the 14th Amendment, giving African American men the right to vote. Both these Wade-Davis bills and the Reconstruction Act were really designed to kind of punish the South, but also to make sure that it guaranteed the rights of African Americans in the South. So here you have the plan of basically militarizing the South, putting them in, not giving them back the states, but putting them in districts where the generals are in charge to reinforce and enforce the rights of African Americans. So here you have the president with a plan and the Congress with a plan. There are two different parties. They don't see eye to eye, and it's a recipe for conflict. And that's exactly what happens. Congress is dominated by a group of Republicans known as the Radical Republicans. These are Republicans that were very strongly on the ending of slavery and providing equality and full citizenship to African Americans. And they were actually led by a congressman named Thaddeus Stevens. He was kind of seen as the leader of the Radical Republicans. Their plan of these Reconstruction Acts to militarize the South, put the South into complete military control. They had their version of what they wanted to have happen, and there you have President Andrew Johnson, a Democrat from Tennessee, wanting to quickly bring the states of the South back into the Union quickly. And now we have a battle going on between two of the branches of Congress. The president on one side and the Congress on the other side. We have almost like a constitutional crisis. Now, the Radical Republicans tried to make life miserable for Johnson. They passed a series of laws and acts that makes it very difficult for Johnson to do his job. Johnson gets very frustrated. He fires his Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, who was a very close ally of the Radical Republicans. And with that firing of the Secretary of War, the Radical Republicans said, that's it. We're done with this character. We are going to find a way to get him out of office. And they decide to use a method that's in the Constitution called impeachment. Impeachment is a process for removing public officials from wrongdoing. It starts first in the House of Representatives, where they draw up basically criminal charges and say, you have broken the law here, guy, and we're going to remove you from office. And that's exactly what the House does. They say Johnson should not have been able to fire this cabinet officer of the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton. And so they pass these charges, and then it moves over to the Senate, where the Senate basically holds a trial. And in the trial, it's like a real trial. You have a prosecution, you have a defense, and the senators serve as the judges and the jury. And so they get to decide, is this person wrong? Has it committed a crime? They hold a vote, and it takes 2/3 of the Senate to vote for removal. If they say, yep, he's guilty, get him out of here, he's gone. He's not going to be president anymore. If they say, no, he didn't break any crimes, he's innocent, and he's allowed to basically stay in office. So that's what happens to Johnson here. And so there's a trial, and this becomes a pretty big show in Washington, D.C. In fact, many people go sit in the gallery of the Senate to hear the impeachment hearings. It gets very heated, very contested. They hold a vote. Johnson's found not guilty by one vote. One senator at the last minute decides, you know, this really isn't that big of a crime, not enough to force him out of office, and so he stays in office. But it really weakens Johnson for the rest of his term. And the Republicans sort of gain over control of Reconstruction, and they will end up getting their way. They'll get these military districts, and they'll really put some restrictions on the South and really try and hold the South accountable to giving African Americans full citizenship rights and equality in the South. So here we have these different Reconstruction plans. You have President Lincoln's 10% plan. You have Johnson's Reconstruction plan, trying to quickly heal the country, bring the states back together very rapidly. And then you have the congressional plans of the Wade-Davis bill, and then the Radical Republican plans of the Reconstruction Acts that really were designed to punish the South and protect the rights of African Americans living in the South, leading to this conflict. And that's the beginning here of Reconstruction. So I hope you enjoyed listening. As always, if you have questions or concerns, please come talk to me. And thank you for listening.